My name is Caleb Mitchell, and up until a month ago, I believed I had everything a man could ever want. A thriving business, financial security, the respect of my peers, and, most importantly, a woman I loved more than life itself. For years, I worked tirelessly to build the life I had, believing that dedication and honesty would guarantee happiness. But life doesn't work that way. Looking back, I realized that the signs had been there all along. Little cracks forming in the perfect picture we had built together. The problem with love is that it blinds you. It makes you ignore what's right in front of you. By the time I finally opened my eyes, it was already too late. I met Isabel at a charity gala. It was one of those events where rich people pretend to care about something, while subtly competing over who donated the most. I was there out of obligation, making my rounds, shaking hands, faking smiles, until I saw her. She was wearing a navy blue dress, standing alone with a glass of wine, looking unimpressed by the entire evening. Her dark eyes carried something intriguing, confidence, intelligence, and maybe even a hint of mischief. She wasn't like the other women at the event, who laughed too loudly at jokes that weren't funny or lingered too long around the most powerful men in the room. Isabel didn't try to impress anyone. That's what impressed me the most. That night, we talked for hours. About the things we loved, the things we feared, about our dreams and ambitions. I had never felt a connection like that before. I was hooked. Within a year, we were married. The first few years were blissful. We traveled. We built a home. We shared our lives so seamlessly that I couldn't imagine ever being without her. She was my person, my equal, my best friend. And then, something changed. It started with little things. The way she turned her phone over whenever I walked into the room. The late nights at work. The distracted look in her eyes when I spoke to her. I tried to ignore it. Told myself she was just stressed, that maybe I was reading too much into things. After all, we had been together for years. Things weren't always going to be exciting, right? But doubt has a way of sinking its claws into you, digging deeper with every unanswered question. Then, one night, everything changed. I came home earlier than expected. The house was quiet, except for the faint sound of Isabel's voice coming from the kitchen. It's too risky. Not tonight. I stopped in my tracks. Her voice was low, urgent, different. I'll call you later. He's home. My heart pounded. I wanted to believe it was nothing, but my instincts screamed otherwise. I stepped into the kitchen. She turned quickly, locking her phone in a practiced motion. For the briefest moment, I saw something flicker in her expression. Guilt? Fear? But in the next second, it was gone, replaced by a warm smile. You're home early, she said casually. Yeah, I replied, forcing myself to sound normal. Who were you talking to? Lauren, she answered smoothly, mentioning one of her closest friends. We were planning a weekend trip. I searched her face, looking for cracks, looking for the truth. You sounded tense. She let out a small laugh and stepped closer, placing a hand on my chest. Caleb, are you seriously jealous? I hesitated. She was good at this, turning things around, making me feel ridiculous. No, I said finally. Just asking. She leaned up and kissed me, lingering just long enough to make me doubt my own thoughts. That night, after she fell asleep, I picked up her phone. It was locked, and she had changed the password. Over the next few days, I tried to convince myself that I was being paranoid, that I was creating problems where there were none. But then there were more late nights, more missed calls, more secrets. And then, one evening, she came home smelling like a cologne I didn't recognize. I wanted to believe her excuses. I really did. But something inside me had already shifted. I wasn't just doubting her anymore. I was preparing for the truth. That Friday, I invited Derek, my best friend and business partner, over for drinks. We sat on the penthouse balcony, whiskey glasses in hand, watching the city lights flicker below us. You look like hell, Derek said, studying me. What's going on? I hesitated. Derek had been my closest friend for years. He had seen me at my best and my worst. If there was anyone I could talk to about this, it was him. I think Isabel is cheating on me. Derek set his drink down. Shit, are you sure? No, I admitted. But I feel it. He didn't answer right away, just leaned back in his chair, watching me. Listen, man. I never said anything before because I didn't want to be that guy, but I never trusted her. I frowned. Why? She's too perfect, he said simply. Too careful. And you? You're not the kind of guy who doubts people for no reason. I wanted to argue, but deep down, I knew he was right. That night, as I lay in bed beside Isabel, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing, I felt something inside me harden. I couldn't ignore the signs any longer. I had two choices. I could sit back and let this eat away at me, or I could find the truth. Because if my worst fears were true, if the woman I had given my heart to had betrayed me, I wouldn't let myself be the victim. No, I would find the truth. And when I did, I would make damn sure I was the one who walked away from this in control. Because in this game, you were either the hunter or the prey. And I refused to be the latter. I woke up feeling like I had swallowed a stone. Heavy, unsettling. Isabel was curled up beside me, her breathing slow and steady, one arm draped lazily across my chest. For a second, I let myself believe everything was normal, that I was just being paranoid. But I wasn't, because no matter how much I wanted to, I couldn't unsee that text message. Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again. The words had burned into my brain, replaying over and over, carving out a space in my chest where doubt festered. I shifted slightly, careful not to wake her, and just watched. Could someone who loved me look me in the eyes every morning and lie? Could they kiss me, touch me, hold my hand? While knowing what they had done, I swallowed hard and slid out of bed, grabbing my phone before heading downstairs. The house was silent. Too silent. I made coffee, my hands gripping the cup tighter than necessary, my heart hammering. I had two choices. I could ignore this, bury it, let her explanations soothe me like warm honey, even if they were poison, or I could find out the truth. And I already knew which one I was going to choose. I started small, watching, listening, memorizing every little detail. She was careful, but not careful enough. The way she checked her phone more often, how she started locking it when she never used to, the sudden late nights at work. And then there was the scent. The first time, I ignored it. The second time, I almost asked. The third time, I knew. It wasn't my cologne, and it sure as hell wasn't hers. I wanted to believe she had a reason. A real one. Maybe a coworker had hugged her. Maybe she had borrowed someone's jacket. But I was done making excuses. It was a Saturday morning. Isabel was in the shower, singing softly to herself. Her phone was on the nightstand. Lit up. Unlocked. I didn't mean to look, but I did. And there it was. Unknown number. Can't stop thinking about last night. My stomach twisted. I picked up the phone, my fingers suddenly ice cold. I scrolled. The previous messages had been deleted. Smart. But she had missed one. I read it again. My chest felt tight. I had known. But knowing and knowing are two different things. I heard the water shut off. I placed the phone back, my hands shaking, and then I walked downstairs, gripping the edge of the counter, trying to steady myself. I met Derek that afternoon. He took one look at me and sighed. Shit. What happened? I told him. Everything. The text. The late nights. The scent that wasn't mine. He listened. Then, after a long pause, he leaned forward. You need proof? I already have proof. No, he shook his head. A single text? She'll talk her way out of that in 5 seconds. You need real proof. I clenched my jaw. And how do I get that? He didn't hesitate. You hire someone. I stared at him. A private investigator, he clarified. You need someone who knows what they're doing. Because if she's cheating, she's already lying. And if she's lying, she's already planned what to say when you ask. I hated how much sense that made. I hated that I was even having this conversation, but I hated the alternative more. That night, after Isabel fell asleep, I sat in the dark, my phone in my hand. The number was already dialed. I just had to press call. I exhaled. Then I did. A low voice answered. This is Jordan. I swallowed. I need someone followed. A pause. Then, spouse? I hesitated. Yeah. Another pause. Then, when do we start? I gripped the phone tighter. Tomorrow. The next morning, Isabel kissed me goodbye before leaving for work. She smelled like jasmine and vanilla, the same way she always had. She smiled at me like she always did. And for just a second, I almost let myself believe her. Then the door shut, and I picked up my phone. She just left, I told Jordan. There was a pause. Then, got it. I'll update you soon. I hung up, my stomach churning. The truth was coming, and I wasn't ready for it. But it didn't matter anymore, because it was already too late to turn back. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that message flashing in my mind. Over and over again, I imagined her with him. Whoever he was, laughing, touching, kissing. I imagined them together while I sat in the dark, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Jordan said he would update me soon. I didn't know what soon meant. An hour? A day? A week? The waiting was the worst part. I wasn't ready to hear what he had to say, but at the same time, I needed to know. The truth was like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding, and I couldn't stitch it closed until I saw the damage for myself. Isabel came home late again. She didn't text me, didn't call, just walked in, tossed her purse on the counter, and sighed like she was exhausted, like she had been working all night instead of doing whatever she was actually doing. I watched her, my stomach in knots. She looked at me, and for a second, I thought I saw something flicker in her eyes. Hesitation, maybe even guilt. Then she smiled, walked over, and kissed me on the cheek like everything was normal. "How was your day?" she asked, her voice light, effortless. I swallowed hard. "Fine." She nodded, moving to the fridge, grabbing a bottle of water, twisting the cap off. Mine was crazy. We had a meeting that ran over, and then Lauren wanted to grab drinks, but I was too tired, so I just came home. Lie. I didn't know why, but I could feel it. Maybe it was the way she didn't meet my eyes. Maybe it was the way her hand tightened around the water bottle, just a little too much. Maybe it was just instinct. But I knew. I wanted to ask. I wanted to say, "Where were you really? Who were you with? Who sent you that text?" But I didn't. Because Jordan was already on it. And I wanted her to keep thinking she was winning. That night, she fell asleep easily. I didn't. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling like my entire life was unraveling thread by thread. The next afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I stepped out of the office, my heart in my throat, and answered. "It's Jordan," the voice said. I swallowed. "Yeah. She met someone last night." The world tilted. My grip tightened on the phone. "Where?" I managed to say. "Small bar downtown." They were careful, but I got some shots. Nothing too obvious. No kissing, no touching. But you'll want to see them. I closed my eyes, inhaling sharply. Send them. Already did. A second later, my phone buzzed again. A message. I hesitated before opening it, afraid of what I would see. Then I looked, and my stomach dropped. Isabel, sitting at a bar, leaning in close, smiling, laughing. Across from her was a man. Dark hair, sharp suit, expensive watch. Handsome in a way that made me hate him instantly. I stared at the picture, my pulse hammering. It wasn't definitive proof. She could argue it was just a friend, just a coworker, just a business meeting. But I knew. I knew. Jordan's voice pulled me back. "Do you want me to keep following her?" I forced myself to breathe. "Yeah. You got it." I hung up and stood there, gripping my phone so hard I thought I might break it. This was real. It was happening. And I had no idea what the hell to do next. I went home that night and looked at her differently. Every word she said sounded like a lie. Every smile felt fake. I wanted to grab her, shake her, scream at her. Tell me the truth. Stop pretending. Stop lying to my face. But instead, I sat across from her at dinner, nodding at the right moments, pretending like I wasn't dying inside. She asked me how my day was. I told her it was fine. She told me she was exhausted from work. I nodded like I believed her. And then, right before bed, she kissed me. It was soft, gentle, like it had been 1,000 times before. But this time, it made my skin crawl. I turned off the light, rolled over, and pretended to sleep. 2 days later, Jordan called again. "She's seeing him again tonight." I exhaled. Where? Hotel. The air left my lungs. Not a bar. Not a restaurant. Not somewhere she could argue was innocent. A hotel? There was no talking her way out of that. I looked at the clock. 8:37 p.m. Jordan spoke again. You want me to stop following and send the report, or? I gripped my phone. My entire body tense. No. Keep going. I need to know everything. I didn't know why I was doing this to myself. Maybe part of me still needed to see it, to hear it, to be absolutely sure before I did what came next. I sat in my car outside our house, gripping the wheel, feeling like I was about to explode. My phone buzzed again. A new message. A picture. Isabel, stepping out of her car, wearing a red dress I hadn't seen before. Hair perfect, lips painted dark, looking beautiful, looking like she had dressed up for someone who wasn't me. And then, another picture. The man, holding the hotel door open for her. Her stepping inside. I stared at the image, my hands shaking. And then I threw my phone at the dashboard so hard the screen cracked. I sat there, breathing hard, my mind spinning. I had my answer. There was no coming back from this. And now, all I had left was figuring out what the hell I was going to do about it. I sat in the car outside my house, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The house was dark, quiet, just like any other night. But everything had changed. I had the proof now. Not just suspicions. Not just a gut feeling I couldn't shake. Real, tangible proof. She had met him at a hotel. I had the pictures. I had the time. I had everything. And yet, I still couldn't move. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone, staring at the last message from Jordan. A photo of Isabel, standing outside that hotel, her body angled toward him. The way she smiled at him. The way she looked at him. It was the way she used to look at me. I felt something crack inside my chest. I should have been angry. Furious. The kind of rage that makes men break things, punch walls, throw chairs. But I wasn't. I just felt empty. For 6 years, I had built my life around this woman. Loved her. Chose her. Every single day. And she had chosen him. I closed my eyes, leaning my head back against the seat. How long had it been going on? Weeks? Months? Had it started when I first noticed her pulling away? Or had it been there all along, buried beneath the illusion of a perfect marriage? Had she ever loved me? That thought was the worst of all. The front porch light flickered on. My breath caught in my throat as I watched the shadow move past the curtains. She was awake, waiting for me. For a moment, I considered driving away, just disappearing into the night and never coming back, letting her wake up alone, wondering where I'd gone, wondering if I'd finally figured it out. But no, I needed to see her, to look her in the eyes one last time before I decided what to do next. I stepped out of the car, my movements slow, deliberate, like I was walking through water. The second I opened the front door, I smelled her perfume, that soft, floral scent that used to make me weak in the knees. Now, it just made me sick. She was standing in the kitchen, barefoot, wearing one of my t-shirts. Her hair was damp from the shower, tucked behind one ear, and when she turned to look at me, her eyes were warm, soft, like she hadn't just ripped my heart out. "There you are," she said, setting her mug down. I was starting to worry. Her voice was light, easy. She had no idea. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced a smile. "Just went for a drive." She walked toward me, her bare feet silent against the hardwood floor. "You okay?" I nodded. Lied. Because I wasn't ready yet. Not yet. She wrapped her arms around me, pressing her body against mine, resting her head against my chest. And for the first time, I didn't hold her back. I couldn't. Her skin felt foreign. Her scent was wrong. And as she pulled away and looked up at me, I saw it. The version of her I had loved. The version I had fought for, trusted, built my life around. And I realized that version had never really existed. She was still watching me, waiting. "Come to bed," she said softly. And I did, because I wanted her to think she had one. The next morning, I woke up before her. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythmic sound of her breathing. I used to love waking up next to her. That peaceful moment before the day started, before reality set in. Now, I just felt trapped. Carefully, I slid out of bed and left the room. I needed air. I ended up in my office, closing the door behind me, locking it out of instinct. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and texted Jordan. Keep going. I need more. He responded immediately. Understood. I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. I didn't know what I was waiting for. More pictures? A text from him? Some kind of confirmation that would finally push me over the edge? Or maybe, deep down, I was waiting for her to confess. For her to sit me down, take my hands, look me in the eyes, and tell me the truth. But she wouldn't. She had made her choice. And now, I was making mine. I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to destroy her. Not out of revenge. Not out of anger. But because she had taken something from me. Something I could never get back. And I refused to let her walk away unscathed. I put my phone down, exhaled slowly, and walked back into the bedroom. She stirred, blinking up at me with sleepy eyes. You okay? I smiled. Lied. Again. But not for long. I spent the next few days playing the role of a man who didn't know his wife was betraying him. It was harder than I thought it would be. Every time she touched me, I had to fight the instinct to pull away. Every time she smiled, I had to remind myself that the same lips had just kissed another man. And every night, when she curled up next to me in bed, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how long she had been doing this. I kept my distance just enough to make her feel like something was off, but not enough for her to suspect I knew. I wanted her to wonder if I was the one pulling away, to think it was just another rough patch in our marriage. The truth was, I was waiting. Waiting for Jordan to send me what I needed. Waiting for her to slip up. Waiting for the moment she would no longer be able to lie her way out of this. The text came 3 nights later. Jordan, you're going to want to see this. I was in my office when my phone buzzed. Isabel upstairs in bed. My stomach tightened as I opened the message. A picture. Not at a bar. Not at a restaurant. Not somewhere she could claim was just a coincidence. A hotel room. The curtains were drawn, the lighting dim, but I could still see her clearly. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, wearing nothing but that red dress, the same one she had left the house in earlier that evening. She wasn't alone. He was standing between her legs, hands gripping her thighs, mouth against her neck. I swallowed hard, while rising in my throat. This was it. Undeniable. I stared at the picture, my pulse hammering in my ears, my vision blurring at the edges. I had prepared myself for this moment, had told myself over and over that I was ready. I wasn't. I felt something inside me break. Not just anger, not just pain. It was something deeper, a shift, a realization. The woman I had loved no longer existed. Or maybe she never had. I forced myself to breathe, to think past the haze of emotion clouding my mind. Then I texted Jordan back. Me. I want every single detail. Where, when, how long. Everything. Jordan. Already compiling the report. You'll have it in the morning. The morning. That meant I had one more night of pretending. One more night of laying next to her, knowing that hours earlier she had been with him. I put my phone down, closed my eyes, and tried to steady my breathing. I wasn't going to confront her tonight. I wasn't going to let my emotions get the best of me. She had been careful, calculated. Now it was my turn. I climbed into bed beside her, my movements stiff, forced. She stirred slightly, rolling toward me in her sleep, her hand resting on my chest. It took everything in me not to shove it away. Morning came like a blade slicing through my chest. I got out of bed before she woke up, showered, dressed, and went downstairs to make coffee. Isabel walked in minutes later, wearing nothing but my shirt, stretching her arms above her head like she hadn't spent the night sleeping beside a man she was actively betraying. She walked up behind me, wrapping her arms around my waist, pressing a kiss to my shoulder. Morning, she murmured. I clenched my jaw, forced my voice to stay even. Morning. If she noticed how tense I was, she didn't say anything. God, I'm exhausted, she sighed, moving to pour herself a cup of coffee. Yesterday was a nightmare. The office was chaos, and Lauren was being so dramatic. I swear, that girl needs therapy. I watched her over the rim of my mug as she lied to me so easily, so effortlessly. She didn't even hesitate. That's what hurt the most. She didn't even feel guilty. She had kissed him last night, let him touch her, held him the way she used to hold me. And now she was standing in our kitchen, acting like nothing had happened. I set my cup down. I couldn't do this much longer. The need to destroy her was building, growing stronger by the second. But I needed to be patient. If I exploded now, she would find a way to manipulate the situation, to twist the truth, to gaslight me into thinking I was the one who had driven her to this. I needed to control the narrative. I needed to be smart. I kissed her on the forehead before heading to work, my stomach twisting as she smiled up at me, completely unaware of what was coming. By the time I got to my office, Jordan's report was waiting in my inbox. I stared at the email for a long moment before clicking it open. The details were all there. Dates, times, locations, receipts, security footage. They had been meeting for months. I clenched my fists so tightly my nails dug into my palms. I scrolled through the attachments, my jaw tightening with every line I read. He wasn't just some random guy. His name was Adrian Bennett, a corporate lawyer, wealthy, well-connected, and married. I stared at the information in front of me, my mind racing. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was cheating with someone who had just as much to lose. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. A plan began to take shape in my mind. This wasn't just about confronting her anymore. This was about ruining her, because she had destroyed something inside me, something I would never get back, and I wasn't going to let her walk away from this unscathed. I picked up my phone and dialed Derek. He answered on the first ring. "You ready?" he asked, his tone knowing. I glanced at the report again, at the photos, the evidence, the undeniable proof of what she had done. I let out a slow breath. "Yeah," I said. "I'm ready." This wasn't going to be a fight. It was going to be a massacre. The night before everything fell apart, Isabel lay beside me in bed, her body curled into mine like she belonged there, like she hadn't spent the last few months betraying me, lying to my face, sneaking off to another man's bed. I felt her breathing, steady and slow. I listened to it, memorized it, because after tonight, she would never sleep beside me again. I had spent the last week planning every step, every detail, every word I would say. I had given her enough time to confess, enough chances to look me in the eye and tell me the truth. But she never did. She never even hesitated. So now, I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to destroy her, not out of revenge, not out of anger, but because she had taken everything from me, my love, my trust, my belief in her, and crushed it underfoot without a second thought. She had built a web of lies so perfectly woven, so carefully maintained, that she believed she could keep me inside it forever. She had no idea that I had been cutting myself free, and tomorrow I would burn that web to the ground. The next evening, the pieces were set. Adrian's wife, Victoria, had agreed to meet me. She had taken the news quietly, too quietly. No screaming, no accusations, just silence as she scrolled through the photos, the records, the undeniable evidence of her husband's affair with my wife. Then she had set her phone down, exhaled, and said, "How do you want to do this?" She wasn't looking for apologies. She wasn't looking for explanations. She was looking for justice, and I was more than willing to give it to her. We planned everything carefully. I wanted there to be no way out for either of them, so I made sure that our confrontation wouldn't be private. I wanted them to feel watched, exposed, cornered. I wanted them to understand what it felt like to be trapped in a nightmare of their own making. So I chose a place where the walls would close in on them. A restaurant, one they had been to before. A place where they had sat across from each other, smiling, whispering, pretending like the world belonged only to them. Tonight, it would. For the last time, Isabel walked into the restaurant at exactly 7:30 p.m., her heels clicking against the floor. She was dressed immaculately, as always, her hair pulled back, her makeup flawless. She scanned the room, searching. Then she saw me. I watched the confusion flicker across her face, just for a second, before she smoothed it away. She walked toward me, smiling. "Caleb, what are you doing here?" She had no idea. I gestured to the seat across from me. "Sit." Something in my voice made her pause. I had never spoken to her like that before. But she sat. She placed her purse on the table, crossing her legs. Is everything okay? I didn't answer, because at that moment, Adrian walked in, and behind him, Victoria. Isabel's body went stiff. She turned, her face carefully composed, but I saw it. The panic. She looked at Adrian, then at Victoria, then back at me. I smiled. A slow, cold, deliberate smile. And then, very calmly, I set the manila envelope on the table. Adrian sat down. Victoria did too. For a moment, no one spoke. Then I pushed the envelope toward Isabel. Open it. Her hands trembled as she reached for it. She hesitated. Then, slowly, she pulled out the photos. Her and Adrian. Hotels. Restaurants. Late-night meetings. It was all there. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Then I leaned in, my voice barely above a whisper. How long? She swallowed. Caleb. I slammed my hand on the table. She jumped. I had never raised my voice at her before. Not once. She blinked rapidly, panic settling into her expression now. I can explain. I laughed. Actually laughed. It wasn't amusement. It was something darker. Explain? I repeated. Explain what, exactly? That you've been sleeping with him for months? That you've been lying to my face every single day? That you played me for a fool? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Adrian shifted uncomfortably beside her. He hadn't said a word. Not to me. Not to Victoria. Because he knew. He knew there was nothing to say. Victoria turned to her husband, her voice steady, almost clinical. You disgust me. Adrian exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. Liv, She held up a hand. I don't want to hear it, she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were burning. She turned to me. Are we done here? I nodded. She stood up. You'll be hearing from my lawyer, Adrian. Then she walked out. Just like that. She didn't yell, didn't cry. She was done, and I envied her for it. Isabel reached for my hand. I pulled away so fast her breath hitched. Caleb, please, she whispered. Let's just talk about this. Talk? I said, leaning back. You don't talk, Isabel. You lie. Her eyes filled with tears. I almost felt something. Almost. But then I remembered the nights I had laid awake, listening to her breathe beside me, knowing she had been with him only hours before. And whatever was left inside me, whatever small piece of love I had held onto, died. I stood up, grabbing my coat. Caleb, she said again, softer now. I love you. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I shook my head. No, you don't. I turned and walked away. I didn't look back, because I didn't need to. She was nothing to me now, and for the first time in a long time, I was free.